Okay, dear students, we're ready to start. Welcome to your video conference for today, April the 29th. Well, this is the last session of this month, so we're going to continue with the topic that we are working on today. And the topic of globalization is now going to be connected with something particular that we have today. This particular topic is sustainable development goals. So we're going to be talking about what are the sustainable development goals and what are the concrete examples for each one according to the goals that they project and the objectives that they established. Well, to begin with, we have some analysis of present and past situations of the country. So for this, we're going to ask a couple of questions here. Well, so here we have our world yesterday and our world today. The first question we see in the screen is, what were some serious problems in Colombia last year? So in the chat, I would like you to write what you remember were some serious problems in Colombia last year, okay? So for the people who joined the meeting, expecting your answers in the chat window. In answer to this question, what were some serious problems in Colombia last year? Try to remember the social issues, the political scenario. Try to remember, well, the complex situations that maybe you lived in the city, and then you try to recall that in your answer. Well, another question that we have here is, what is the biggest problem in the world at the moment? So this is another question for reflecting about what is the biggest problem or the most serious problem in the world at the moment. Well, please answer the questions in the chat window. Another question for reflection is, how can we help to overcome the problems in our country? So this third question is related to the first question. If we had some problems last year, how can we help now in the present to overcome these problems of our country? Well, in answer to the first question, what were some serious problems in Colombia last year? Paula Monsalve answers the stolen budget for public education. Well, this was a scandal that happened in the second semester last year. So yes, unfortunately, this is something that happened. Paula Monsalve is giving this example. That's a good one. Remember the social disturbs. For example, there were some strikes and protests. Also, some social leaders were systematically assassinated. So this is a problem as well. Another problem that is persisting is corruption. So don't forget about this scenario of corruption. And maybe another problem that always affects Colombia is unemployment. So this is something that we can consider when talking about the problems. About the second situation, what is the biggest problem in the world at the moment? So this is something evident in our society and in the world. So what is that problem? Is a reflection to think about. Well, now here we see time for a change. So this title is what we want to talk about. That is the Sustainable Development Goals. There are urgent global issues or problems. Millions of people don't have enough food to eat. Women still earn less money than men, and they have fewer rights. Well, in some countries that is evident. Plant and animal species are rapidly dying, and the gap between rich and poor is still prevalent. So this is a difference that is really noticeable in society. We seem to live in a world of two extremes. To solve the world's problems, the next generations need to know what those problems are and how they are interlinked, or how the problems are connected. It's basically that. Well, in the chat, before we continue, Tatiana says, medicine lacks resources. So this is a present problem in Colombia and in the world, because even in the best countries about technology or resources, this is an evident problem. So medicine lacks resources and more focus on medicine, says Tatiana in the chat. Well, that is a nice contribution, Tatiana. Now we're going to continue here with the United Nations. So you know that the United Nations organization is an organization that is present in basically all the countries of the world. So before we continue with the Sustainable Development Goals, we're going to talk about what are the United Nations and what they do for the people in the world. So here in this chart, we have the synthesis of these three questions. So who are the United Nations? They are an international organization that was created in 1945. So if we go back to history, there was a historic moment in 1945. What happened in that year? Why is that year important for our history? Is one question. Well, the United Nations are made up of 193 member states. So member states are basically countries, for you to understand it better. When we are talking about member states of the United Nations, it refers to the number of countries. Well, who are they? They have different elements in the organization. They have a General Assembly. The General Assembly is conformed by these 193 countries. There are also councils or consejos. There is a council of security, there is an economic council, and there is also a social council. In addition, part of the members of the United Nations is the International Court of Justice. So remember that here in Colombia, some members of Centro Democrático Party, the political party, they have confronted the International Court of Justice, which is really absurd and is ridiculous, because a political party is trying to stop International Court of Justice from operating in our country. And also they have a secretariat. The secretariat is basically like the secretary functions, but in an executive level. So this is what we can tell about who are the United Nations. Well, Gina Alzate says, in 1945, the Second World War ended. Correct. So after the Second World War, the nations got united. Well, they got together and they decided to establish this, the United Nations, to try to prevent these holocausts or these wars from happening. This is one of the ideas. What do they do? In the second chart, we see what are the activities that the United Nations do. One of the goals is this, to maintain peace and security. Also, because what we said and what Gina Alzate was writing in the chat, after the Second World War ended, the idea was that to maintain peace and security. Another objective is to protect human rights around the world. Well, this is a delicate topic because you know that human rights violation is a common thing in many countries, including our country. Also, they are there to deliver humanitarian aid. When there is a disaster or a catastrophe, they try to deliver that. either clothes or food or medical equipment when they have the capacity to do it. Another goal of the United Nations is to promote sustainable development. This phrase, sustainable development, is really in fashion, we can say, in companies, in institutions, because of that, because the United Nations make it an obligation for companies to develop and to promote that sustainable development of companies. And finally, they try to uphold international law. So what does it mean? They try to keep in mind that there are international rules and regulations that the countries should follow. For example, don't abuse prisoners or don't abuse fragile communities, right? Now, where are they? Where do the United Nations work? If we see here in the third part of our chart, they work in Africa. For example, they have the peacekeeping political offices in Nairobi, is one of the countries where they operate. In the Americas, it means in North and South America and Central America, they operate, for example, in New York headquarters, and in Chile, in Santiago de Chile, they also have some offices. They are in Asia and in the Pacific. And for example, in Bangkok, they have the Economic and Social Commission. They also operate in Europe and Central Asia. For example, in Geneva and in Vienna, in these two cities, they have main centers. Their main centers are there. And also in the Middle East, they have the Economic and the Social Commission in Beirut. So as you can see, they are basically everywhere in the world. Some of their actions are still under question because some people question if the United Nations are really operating or relevant, okay? Now, guys, after this introduction of what are the United Nations and what they promote, we're going to continue with the very core topic or the important topic of today, that is this, the 17 goals to transform our world. So about this, the 17 goals, I can tell you that in 2015, the world or the countries of the world adopted 17 global objectives for economic, social, and environmentally sustainable development. What was the idea? The idea was to achieve these goals by the year 2030. So it means 10 years we have until we reach those goals. The 17 goals that you can see in the picture, in the moving picture, these 17 goals have 169 interim objectives. So in total, there are 17 goals. And each goal has like a specific goal or interim objectives that sum a total of 169 goals. Mm, it was based on a global consultation that was done by the United Nations, and these objectives are universal. So it means that everyone is included to take responsibility. Rich countries, poor countries, or developing countries, if we call them. So every country that belongs to the United Nations is responsible for the commitment and the fulfillment of these goals. So it means that states or countries, institutions, private companies, and international communities, as well as civil organizations, they are committed and they are responsible for making these goals happening. So here we see in the chart, the Sustainable Development Goals are a call for action by all countries to promote prosperity while protecting the planet. So one of the objectives is this, protecting the planet. They recognize that ending poverty must go hand in hand with the strategies that build economic growth and address a range of social needs, including these aspects: education, health, social protection, and job opportunities, while tackling or confronting climate change and environmental protection. This is the summary of these objectives. So this is what the objectives intend, and this is what the United Nations try to start doing. Remember that these objectives for the world, or these global goals, started 5 years ago. They started in 2015. So we can see now that every year the United Nations publish the results of what is happening in the world and in the nations. Now, here in this chart, we can see the summary of the global goals for sustainable development. We have from number 1, that is no poverty, up to number 17, that is partnership for goals, or partnerships for goals. Now we're going to study one by one what they mean and what are some of the scenarios that we have at the moment. Well, the first one we have here, well, this circle that you see on the left side down, this circle illustrates or represents the 17 goals. So each goal has a color, and in the circle we see that there are 17 colors. Well, according to what we saw, the first goal is no poverty. What are the facts and what are the numbers about this? We can see that, for example, more than 700 million people still live in extreme poverty. So that's 10% of the population. They are in extreme poverty. As a second fact, we see that having a job doesn't guarantee a decent living. Well, in Colombia, we can see that. Well, something that I wanted to mention is that as we are getting informed, as I am reading you this information about the sustainable goals, please try to orient this information to the Colombian scenario, because these numbers and these figures and facts are global. So you please try to analyze what it is like in Colombia. So we try to accommodate these goals to Colombian scenario, right? Also, on a third aspect, they say that globally there are 122 women aged between the ages of 25 and 34 living in extreme poverty for every 100 men of the same age group. So it means that there are more poor women than men. Another fact is that the majority of people are living on less than $2 a day in the region of sub-Saharan Africa. So poverty is a reality in that region. Also, high poverty rates are often found in small, fragile, and conflict-affected countries. And we can see that Colombia is an example of this. It's a fragile and conflict-affected countries. Also, another figure on poverty or fact is that poverty affects children disproportionately. 1 out of 5 children live in extreme poverty. So this is very sad, because basically 20% of the children in the world live in poverty. So this is sad numbers. Think about the Colombian situation. How many children in Colombia live in poverty? So this is the first goal, no poverty. Now we're going to see the second goal, that is here, zero hunger or no hunger. Well, we're going to see the numbers and the facts. An estimated 821 million people were undernourished or with malnutrition in 2017. So this is a lot of people. The majority of world's hungry people live in developing countries, where 12.9% of the population is undernourished. So undernourished, remember, that is to have bad nutrition. Also, in sub-Saharan Africa remains the region with the highest prevalence of hunger. So you can see that hunger in Africa is really a problem. Also, poor nutrition causes nearly 45% of deaths in children under 5, that is 3.1 million each year. So this is the number, that 3.1 million of children die every year because of hunger. So that is really sad. And as a final fact about zero hunger, we say that 141 million children under the age of 5, it's 25% of the global under 5 population are still chronically undernourished in 2018. So what we can conclude about these facts and numbers is that children are the main victims or are the direct victims of hunger in the world. Then we have the third goal, which is good health and well-being. Well, remember that the expression well-being is bienestar, bienestar, well-being. So we're going to continue with these numbers and facts about child health, and then we have the second scenario. So in about child health, the United Nations says that 17,000 fewer children die each day than in 1990. So this is positive news. The negative news is more than 5 million children still die their fifth birthday each year. So it means that many children, more than 5 million children in the world, don't celebrate a fifth birthday or more than the fifth birthday. Then, since 2000, measles vaccines have averted nearly 15.6 million deaths. So remember that measles are the viruela. Despite determining global progress, an increasing proportion of child deaths are in sub-Saharan Africa and Southern Asia. So you can see that death in children is a common thing in Africa and Southern Asia. Now, about the topic of HIV or AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, we can relate. Remember that 2 weeks ago we were talking about Nigeria, and we were talking about how globalization spread the pandemic of HIV. So if you remember that information about Nigeria particularly, here we have some global figures. So, 36.9 million people globally were living with HIV in 2017. Also, 21.7 million people were accessing antiretroviral therapy in that year. Also, 1.8 million people became newly infected with HIV in 2017, and in that year, 940,000 people died from AIDS-related illnesses. So as you can see, the scenario of health and well-being is worrying because there are not many possibilities, or there is not much guarantee for people to live healthy. Not forgetting about the present problem. Well, at the beginning of this presentation, I was asking you, what is the biggest problem the world is facing at the moment? Well, you didn't answer in the chat, nobody answered, but it's evident that coronavirus or COVID-19 is the biggest problem of the planet at the moment. And this is related to this goal, to goal number 3, that is good health and well-being. Now the nations really need to get serious about how are they going to guarantee good health and well-being after this pandemic or during this pandemic. Now we continue with goal number 4. Goal number 4 is quality education. So basically, this is education that has a global standards of quality. What are the facts and figures? Enrollment or entering primary education in developing countries has reached 99%. This is the good numbers, but bad numbers is that still 57 million primary age children remain out of school. So that means that almost 60 million children in the world don't have access to primary education, which is dramatic. Also, a fact is that more than half of children that have not enrolled in a school live in sub-Saharan Africa. So guys, as you can see, a constant point of reference about bad conditions is sub-Saharan Africa. you know, in Nairobi, Nigeria. So in these countries of Sub-Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa, you can see that poverty and lack of opportunities are something really dramatic. Also, an estimated 50% out of school children of primary school age live in conflict affected areas. Again, as I told you before, as we are reading these facts and numbers, try to think about the Colombian scenario. How many Colombian children can't go to school because of the conflict affected areas? And also, 617 million youth worldwide lack basic mathematics and literacy skills. Remember that literacy skills are ser alfabeta, o estar alfabetizado. So this is a dramatic number because it means that more than 600 million children don't know how to read, or they don't know the basic concepts of mathematics. So education is really a goal to get or to achieve. Then we have goal number 5. Uh, Goal number 5 for the United Nations in these Sustainable Development Goals is gender equality. So in gender equality, we have these numbers that are basically about women and opportunities for women. So the first fact is that globally, 750 million women and girls were married before the age of 18. So, you know, this happens in Mid-Eastern or some Asian countries before the age of 18. So that is sad. Also, the rates of girls between 15 and 19 years old who are subjected to female genital mutilation in 30 countries where the practice is concentrated, this number has dropped from 1 in 2 girls to 1 in 3 girls by 2017. So this still is dramatic. The number of girls or female who are genitally mutilated. Also, a third fact is that in 18 countries, husbands can legally prevent their wives from working. So this is absurd. In 39 countries, daughters and sons don't have equal inheritance rights. And in 49 countries, lack laws protecting women from domestic violence. So you can see that the general facts here are aggressions against women or aggressions against children, right? So gender equality is also one of the goals to achieve. Now we're going to move into objective number 6, that is clean water and sanitation. Well, about clean water and sanitation, the numbers are not very positive and the reality is not really positive. It says that 1 in 4 healthcare facilities lack basic water services. So basically, in a group of 4 hospitals or institutions for healthcare, one doesn't have these basic facilities. So that is dramatic. Also, 3 in 10 people lack access to safely managed drinking water services, and 6 in 10 people lack access to safely managed sanitation facilities. Again, if we are talking about the Colombian scenario, think about the regions in Colombia in which people don't have access to clean water, right? Or where people just don't have water, like in La Guajira. In Guajira, many people still don't have water. Also, at least 892 million people continue to practice open defecation. So this is what we call in Spanish el uso de letrinas. So almost 1,000 million people still have this practice of open defecation in the world. Also, women and girls are responsible for water collection in 80% of households without access to water or premises. So if you see, this is a stereotype, a gender stereotype, in which women or females have to go and pick water. Why can men go and do it? So this is about gender equality and also the stereotypes. Well, I will tell you one more. Between 1990 and 2015, the year of the goals, the proportion of the global population using an improved drinking water source has increased from 70% to 90%. Well, this is a more positive figure about clean water and sanitation. So in the next 10 years, this goal is going to be maintained to offer more clean water and sanitation. Now we continue with affordable and clean energy. That is goal number 7. Here we're talking about renewable energies or alternative energies. So we're going to read the figures. 13% of the global population still lacks access to modern electricity. So imagine that. There are still many people without modern electricity in their homes. Also, 3 billion people rely on wood, coal, charcoal, or animal waste for cooking and heating. You know that here in Colombia, we cook either with electricity or with natural gas, but there are still 3 billion people who use other resources for cooking. Also, energy is the dominant contributor to climate change, accounting for around 60% of the total global greenhouse gas emissions. Remember that greenhouse gas emissions son los gases emitidos por el efecto invernadero. El efecto invernadero se crea debido a la combustión del CO2 o el gas carbónico. Indoor air pollution from using combustible fuels for household energy caused 4.3 million deaths in 2012, with women and girls accounting for 6 out of every 10 of these. So it means that women are in generally more at risk than dying. They're in risk of dying from this pollution or this fossil fuels burning. And finally, the share of renewable energy in final energy consumption has reached 17.5% in 2015. Well, about this topic, the affordable and clean energy or alternative energies, this is really a goal for the new generations and the new academics. They should try to promote alternative sources of energy. So it's really important that people get serious about this goal and make it happen. Well, then we have goal number 8. In goal number 8, the idea is to promote decent work and economic growth. Here, basically, they are giving numbers about unemployment. So the global unemployment rate in 2017 was 5.6, down from 6.4 in 2000. Well, according to these numbers, there is less unemployment. But if you check the numbers in Colombia, maybe the reality is different. What else can we say? Globally, 61% of all workers were engaged or connected in informal employment in 2016. Excluding the agricultural sector, which is 51% of all workers fell into this employment category. Well, basically the numbers about here are unemployment or the possibilities to work. Again, if we are talking about unemployment in Colombia or the lack of access to work, you should think about how is the situation in our country, right? Then we have goal number 9. That goes for industries, innovation, and infrastructure. This is how cities develop their infrastructure and industry. Basic infrastructure like roads, information, and communication technologies, sanitation, electric power, and water remains scarce in many developing countries. So you see that this is dramatic for countries like Colombia. Also, 16% of global population doesn't have access to mobile broadband networks. So this is an important number considering that today we are supposed to be a global world, but this percentage of people still don't have access to good connection. For many African countries, particularly the lower income countries, the existing constraints regarding infrastructure affect firm productivity by around 40%. Well, we should think about industrialization of our country. If we're talking about infrastructure in Colombia, how is this happening, or how real this is for Colombian case? Then we're going to move into goal number 10, that is reduce inequalities. Here we're talking about inequalities between men, women, or children. So the first fact is that in 2016, over 64.4% of products exported by the least developed countries to world market face zero tariffs, an increase of 20% since 2010. Also, evidence from developing countries show that children in the poorest 20% of the population are still up to 3 times more likely to die because before their fifth birthday than children in the richest quintiles. Remember that I was telling you that according to statistics, many children don't reach the age of 5. So still, millions of children in the world die before they are 5 years old. Also, social protection has been significantly extended globally, but there are persons or people with disabilities who are up to 5 times more likely than average to incur catastrophic health expenditures. And also, despite overall declines in maternal mortality in most developing countries, women in rural areas are still up to 3 times more likely to die while giving birth than women living in urban centers. Maybe we should think about these social inequalities in Colombia. What happens about that? Then the next goal, that is number 11, is sustainable cities and communities. You know that a popular slogan for companies and institutions is to become sustainable. So what does it mean to become sustainable? Here we have some facts and figures. Half of humanity, this is 3.5 billion people, lives in cities today, and 5 billion people are projected to live in cities by 2030. So it means that in 10 years, more than half the population are going to live in the cities, and fewer people will live in the countryside or towns. Also, 95% of urban expansion in the next decades will take place in developing world. So it means Europe or, well, no, it means developing world. It means South America or maybe Asia and sub-Saharan countries, right? Also, 883 million people live in slums. Remember that slums is suburbios. They live in slums today, and most of them are found in Eastern and Southeastern Asia. So this is the dramatic number about that. If we're talking about sustainable cities and communities, we should see examples of companies in Colombia that promote this, or maybe departamentos in Colombia that promote this. If you take the example of Medellin, Medellin is an innovational city, and a couple of years ago, Medellin won a prize for being the most innovational city in the world. So you can take examples of these sustainable cities and communities. Now we continue with goal number 12, that is responsible consumption and responsible production. If we talk about water, the numbers about water are a little dramatic. Less than 3% of the world's water is fresh or drinkable. This means agua potable, fresh water or drinkable water, which 2.5% is frozen in the Antarctica, Arctic, and glaciers. Humanity must rely on only 0.5% for all man's ecosystems and freshwater needs. Also, humankind is polluting water in rivers and lakes faster than nature can recycle and purify. So guys, water pollution is really a serious problem today. Also, more than 1 billion people still don't have access to fresh water. So that is dramatic because it means 2,000 billion people, 2,000 million people don't have this. This is dramatic. Excessive use of water contributes to the global water stress. So it means that excessively use water in things that we don't need. Well, in the next class, we're going to give you some tips about that. Water is free from nature, but infrastructure needed to deliver is expensive. This is when we are talking about water. Now we're talking about food. While substantial and environmental impacts from food occur in the production phase, this is agriculture and food processing, households influence these impacts through their dietary choices and habits. Also, we can say about food that each year an estimated of 1/3 of all food produced in the world ends up in rotting in the bins of consumers and retailers. This number is really sad because it means that 1/3 of the food in the world ends up in the garbage because people don't consume it. Also, about responsible consumption, the numbers are 2 billion people globally are overweight or obese. So obesity is a health problem and it's a global problem. Guys, if we're talking about objective number 12, that is responsible consumption and production of food or water, we should think about the Colombian scenario. How responsible is Colombia about this? Are we really keeping this in mind? Now we continue with goal or objective number 13, that is climate action. You know that global warming is a reality. Believe it or not, the weather is changing and the temperatures are increasing. So the figures are these. As of April 2018, 175 parties had ratified the Paris Agreement, and 168 parties or partidos políticos had communicated the determination to contributions to the United Nations Framework Convention on the Climate Change Secretariat. So one of the purposes or objectives of the United Nations is to really dedicate efforts to climate change. Also in 2018, 10 developing countries had successfully completed and submitted their first iteration for the national adaptation plans for responding to climate change. But you see, there are 193 countries and only 10 developing countries are proposing. So this topic, that is climate action, is really serious for the world and also for Colombia. So we should consider what is the country doing, what is the government doing for facing this climate action. About global emissions, we see that global emissions of carbon dioxide or CO2 have increased by almost 50% since 1990. So guys, you, my students, you are probably 20, 22, or 23 years old. When you were born, the carbon dioxide emissions grew up almost twice. So they duplicated. So it means that we are living with double carbon dioxide than before 1990. This is really serious. And also emissions grew more quickly between 2000 and 2010 than in each of the 3 previous decades. So my dear students, that means that your childhood, when you were growing up, you spent your childhood with 3 times more emissions of carbon dioxide. So this is really dramatic. What is Colombia doing about this, about carbon emissions? We should think about it. And now we have number 14, that is life below water. So since the United Nations are interested in protecting the planet, part of that protection goes for life below water. What are the facts? Oceans cover 3/4 of the Earth's surface, and they contain 90% of the Earth's water and represent 90% of the living space on the planet by volume. So water is really important. We are inside water. We live around water. Over 3 billion people depend on marine and coastal biodiversity for their livelihoods, so their salaries depend on the ocean. Globally, the market value of marine and coastal resources and industries is estimated at 3 trillion per year, about 5% of the global income. Oceans contain nearly 200,000 identified species, but actual numbers may lie in millions. Yeah, according to statistics, there are 9 million species in the world. De acuerdo a algunas estadísticas o proyecciones, porque no son números que se puedan medir en real, pero los biólogos o los que han conocido las especies de este planeta dicen que hay 8 o 9 millones de especies en el mundo, ¿no? Entonces, aquí en estos números están hablando de 200.000 especies identificadas, pero ¿dónde están casi los otros 7 u 8 millones de especies que hay? Oceans absorb about 30% of carbon dioxide produced by humans, buffering the impacts of global warming. In conclusion, a life below the water, which means in oceans and rivers, is really something that the governments need to protect and work for. Then we have goal number 15, that is life on land. This is la vida en la tierra. So life on land has two aspects, forests and desertification. About forests, around 1.6 billion people depend on forests for their livelihood, including 70 million indigenous people. So if we think about the Colombian scenario, indigenous people are being taken away from their lands, and this is a reality. The social leaders are assassinated and they are moved from the lands. Forests are home to more than 80% of all terrestrial species of animals, plants, and insects. De esos 7 u 8 millones de especies que estábamos diciendo, obviamente no todos están en el océano, pero ellos también corresponden aquí a las especies terrestres de animales, de plantas y de insectos. Also, between 2010 and 2015, the world lost 3.3 million hectares of forest areas. So this is really sad. About desertification, this is how the land becomes deserts. 2.6 billion people depend directly on agriculture, but 52% of the land used for agriculture is moderately or severely affected by soil degradation. Also, arable land loss is estimated at 30 to 35 times the historical rate. So what is the conclusion here? That the planet, the Earth, is becoming dry and drier. Every time we are losing the green and many areas are becoming deserts. That is because of climate change. So many regions will become from forests to deserts in the next years. Then we have objective number 16, that is peace, justice, and strong institutions. This topic is really serious for us, for Colombian scenarios, because you know that peace is something convulsing and is something that is always in the fight. Well, about peace, justice, we say among institutions most affected by corruption are the judiciary and police. So this is no surprise for us, for Colombian. The institutions are corrupt. Corruption, bribery, it means, se me fue la palabra, bribery. Well, you help me in the chat. Theft and tax evasion cost come 1.26 trillion for developing countries. So this includes Colombian. This amount of money could be used to live those who are living with less than $1.25 a day. Entonces dice que en la corrupción más de 1.26 trillones, o sea, miles de millones se van en corrupción que podrían ayudar para esos que viven con $1.25 al día. So this is really dramatic. Also, approximately 28.5 million primary school age who are out of school live in conflict affected areas. So this topic of peace, justice, and strong institutions is really dramatic in Colombia. Also, they include the violence against children. So violence against children affects more than 1 billion children around the world, and it costs societies up to $7 trillion a year. Also, 50% of the world's children experience violence every year. We include not also domestic violence, but war, paramilitary, guerrilla, or this kind of aggressions. Also, according to statistics, every 5 minutes, somewhere in the world, a child is killed by violence. So this is ridiculous. Also, 1 in 10 children is sexually abused before the age of 18. So basically, 10% of the children are abused before the age of 18. Well, the numbers are dramatic, and if we summarize, in Colombia, violence against children is a reality and is something that we need to change. And finally, we have objective number 17, that is partnerships for the goals. When we are talking about partnerships, a possible translation is alianzas, las alianzas. So what are the partnerships for the goals? Is about official development assistance that stood 146.6 billion in 2017. This represents a decrease of 0.6% in real terms. Well, we want to read some concluding evidence. So 70% of imports from developing countries enter developed countries duty-free, so no taxes. The debt burden of developing countries remains stable at about 3% of export revenue. Also, the number of internet users in Africa almost doubled in the past 4 years. Well, this is positive for African population. And this is interesting to you, digital natives. 30% of the world's youth are digital natives, active online for at least 5 years. So this is about interaction globally. But more 4 billion people do not use the internet, and 90% of them are from the developing world. Well, these numbers are from 2015 or 2017. So, of course, the situation was different. But now, with the COVID pandemic, we can see that maybe these numbers have risen dramatically because people are locked down in their houses. So, it means that people spend more time connecting to the internet. Well, about some comments that I see in the chat. Gina Alzate says, well, with the fracking, the Colombian government is doing a big mess with biodiversity. This is fact, Gina, it's true. Gina says we should go vegan. Well, you know that one solution is if people went vegan. It would help the planet. That's true. Well, guys, now we have something that is the Sustainable Development Goals webpage or the website. So we're going to see a little example. We have a couple of minutes. So I just want to show you this, guys. Let me show you. Here on the screen, we have this website that is sdgindex.org. Here we have the website. Se llama la página Sustainable Development Report. El website es SDG Index, index como índice.org. Aquí en la presentación igual sale, entonces tomen nota, chicos, de este website, el que sale aquí, ya que es un ejercicio interesante que vamos a hacer. Entonces, bueno, aquí ya sale en la pantallita, entonces está sdgindex.org. Cuando ustedes van a ese link, que es de Naciones Unidas, hablan entonces del reporte del desarrollo sostenible. Entonces, este desarrollo sostenible lo podemos explorar a nivel global. Entonces, acá en esta parte, bueno, ya salió en la pantalla. Entonces, estamos en la página de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Entonces, entramos allí a esa página que les dije. Aquí debajo del mapa aparece Interactive SDG, que es Sustainable Development Goals Dashboards, y esto nos va a llevar a un mapa del planeta. Opening. Entonces aquí está actualizando el mapita. Este mapa que tiene, chicos, es un atlas mundial del desarrollo sostenible. Entonces nos va a dar los puntajes o los porcentajes de cómo están los países. Entonces vean que aquí abajo está el índice global. Entonces, en azul oscuro, el mayor azul, el más oscuro de todos, son los países que han más del 80% de desarrollo sostenible. En el mapa, ¿cuáles son? O la marca su índice global de desarrollo sostenible es del 85,2%, ¿no? ¿Qué otro vemos? Los países escandinavos, entonces Noruega 80,7%, Suiza tiene el 85%, creo que es el país que más alto tiene el índice de desarrollo sostenible. Veamos Colombia, ustedes dirán, bueno, Colombia, ¿qué pasa aquí, teacher? Colombia va como un buen estudiante, pero sabemos que puede mejorar. En Colombia, el índice de desarrollo sostenible está en 69,6. Mm, Ayer precisamente tuve una videoconferencia con profesores de la universidad, bueno, es de la otra universidad donde yo trabajo, y nos estaban dando esta charla y precisamente este mapita salió del conferencista que nos decía y preguntaban los chicos o los conectados allí, decían, bueno, ¿y quién mide esto? Las Naciones Unidas, obviamente en sus reportes que se envían a nivel global a las oficinas, ellos van actualizando esta información, ¿no? Entonces, este mapa lo vamos a dejar ahí en un material de apoyo que mañana o viernes estaré abriendo en el Google Classroom una actividad de interacción. Entonces la idea, chicos, es que miren estos mapas, ¿cierto? Analicen y vamos a hacer una discusión de esos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Entonces, el tema no termina hoy. El lunes en la sesión que vamos a tener, vamos a hablar más sobre los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible y vamos a estar ya haciendo algo pues más práctico. En el ejercicio de hoy lo que hicimos fue presentar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible uno por uno. Obviamente las cifras son bastantes y yo los dije como rápidamente, ¿cierto? No para en detalle, pero entonces es algo que hay que analizar y a nivel Colombia obviamente vamos a mirar entonces cómo se están cumpliendo estos objetivos de desarrollo sostenible que nos permita comparar, contrastar y edificar, ¿no? Entonces, por ejemplo, ven acá en el mapa, en Libia, que es en el norte de África, en Libia no hay datos disponibles, por eso sale en gris. Entonces, en gris, acá hay unos países africanos que dice no data available, no hay información disponible. En Sudamérica, entonces vemos, por ejemplo, Brasil, un 70% de desarrollo sostenible. Perú tiene un 71, Colombia, como les decía, un 69. Entonces, ahí podemos ver los números, ¿cierto? Lo que nos dicen los números del desarrollo sostenible en las naciones. Russia, 70%. China, un 73%. Algo también para aclarar, chicos, es que ahorita con lo de la pandemia, obviamente estos números están cambiando, ¿no? Han cambiado, porque pues ayer en la charla que teníamos decían algunas personas, bueno, pero esto aplica para la situación actual de ese desarrollo sostenible, de energías limpias, de este uso de los recursos hospitalarios, por ejemplo, que es uno de los objetivos, el envío de los recursos hospitalarios que en países como Italia, que tenía uno de los primeros niveles de salud en el mundo, colapsó hace un mes o un mes y medio. Entonces, todas estas números, estas cifras o numbers o figures, como lo llamamos en inglés, figures, obviamente esto va cambiando y va a cambiar. Entonces, la proyección que tenemos aquí en ese mapa que les mostraba era hasta, bueno, actualizaciones que han hecho recientemente, no sé exactamente hasta cuándo, pero esas cifras obviamente van a cambiar a partir del próximo año en los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, ¿no, chicos? Entonces, espero que haya sido de gran interés el tema. Las diapositivas las voy a subir al aula porque sé que va a ser un recurso muy interesante para ustedes, ¿no? Y como es el tema que vamos a continuar en la otra semana, pues ahí van a tener ese insumo para que recuerden. En las diapositivas, en la última parte, está entonces, recuerden ese mapa, el índice mundial de objetivos de desarrollo, para que lo tengan en cuenta y así puedan ir haciendo el ejercicio que se va a proponer a partir de esta semana. What about North Korea? Ah, bueno, pues miremos aquí. North Korea, por aquí. Japan, Philippines. ¿Qué se le hizo? Indonesia, Korea. Eh, Korea dice no data available. Entonces, como nos damos cuenta, en la República de Corea del Norte no hay datos disponibles. Ya sabemos por qué razones, ¿no? En Corea del Sur el índice de desarrollo sostenible es del 78%. Entonces, Corea es Corea del Sur, hablemos de Corea del Sur, es un país industrializado y ustedes saben que muchas de las cosas de tecnología que ustedes miran es made in Korea, ¿no? Entonces, electronics, gadgets, todo este tipo de tecnología muchas veces viene de fábricas de Corea del Sur. Entonces, el índice de desarrollo de ellos no sorprende que sea de casi el 80%, mientras que el norte no hay datos disponibles porque ellos son una república, pues, secret, ¿no? Diríamos ellos, secretive. Listo, chicos. Entonces, el ejercicio fue, mañana o viernes aparecerá entonces en la plataforma la primera actividad con la que vamos a interactuar sobre este tema que sé que han visto ya de pronto en otras materias y que es de gran interés para todos, ¿no? Thank you very much, Alexandra, Gina, los que participaron. Entonces, gracias por asistir y nos vemos el lunes en la sesión. Bye.